Hello everyone, in this tutorial I will show you how to knit this OPENWORK shawl. This has a beautiful pattern and it's quite lacy, so it will breathe very well. You can use it as a summer shawl as seen in the picture or as a winter or fall piece. The functionality will depend on how long you make it. The shawl I made is 80 inches long, and that's kind of an all-purpose length as it's still long enough to wrap around you but also short enough to wear it in summer, like this picture. To get the length of the picture, you want to make it 47 inches long. The width is a comfortable 18 inches wide. You can add a leather press fastener to it to belt it up or leave it without. And lastly, you can use it as a really long scarf. Overall, if you're looking for a new accessory that's extremely versatile and fashionable, this would be a wonderful piece to make. So if you're going to Spain or some other warm destination anytime soon for the holidays, why not bring this along, as it will most definitely add elegance to any casual look. It's not difficult to make. I'm going to show you this full tutorial step by step on how to make it. This is a woman's, but I also have a men's custom sweater design on my channel that you can knit as well. Both would make for a wonderful gift this holiday season. The materials I use are Paintbox yarn in DK weight, 70% acrylic, 30% nylon. At 182 yards per ball, I used 9 balls of this for my 80 inches, and that totaled 1638 yards. This yarn turned out to be really soft and light. I also used a size 4mm nickel plated circular needle. And you'll need a crochet hook in case you need to pick up any loose stitches along the way. Lastly, this project is made in 12 rounds repeated, and you'll be able to memorize these rounds in no time, which makes for a great knitting project to work on as you watch movies or sit by the fire this upcoming winter. Now let's get started. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more tutorials on my channel, as I have many more in store for you. So let's begin. We're going to begin by casting on. We're going to cast on using the long tail cast on method. For the long tail cast on method, we're going to take our yarn, we're going to take our hook, we're going to take our needle, and we're going to wrap the yarn around it 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now this will give us the approximate length for 10 stitches. So we want to cast on 111 stitches. Okay, so if this gives us 10 stitches, then we're going to go to the closest to 111, which is 110. So all we're going to do is fold it over. So now we fold it over, we have the length of 20 stitches. So if we hold it here, this is the length for 20 stitches, right? So that's 20 stitches. So if we fold it over again, that's the length for 30 stitches. Fold it over again, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. So at this point here, we're going to hold it. This is our tail. Hold this part here, and we're going to create a slip knot. For a slip knot, at this location, we are going to take our yarn and twist it. This part is attached to the ball. This is our tail here. You're going to take your tail and bring it through the hole like this. Then you're going to take your needle, and you're going to put it through, and you're going to pull the tail to tighten it. Now you're going to wrap the yarn. Now we have two pieces here. This part is attached to the ball. This is our tail. The ball, you're going to wrap it around your finger like you're going to get the right tension, so that, you know, as if you're going to knit. For the tail, you're going to put it in your palm like this. Close your palm. Take your thumb, rest it on top of the yarn. Flip. Create an X. In the X, we have this hole here. We're going to take our needle, insert it into the hole from the bottom up. Hold the needle. Take your yarn, wrap it around the needle. Take your loop, flip it over the needle, pull the tail. So we have two loops. The first one is our slip stitch, the second one is the one we just made. So we're going to do that again. In our palm, close it, rest your thumb on top of it, flip. Create an X. Insert your needle from the bottom up into the hole, hold the needle. Put your yarn around the needle. Now take your hole and rest it over the needle, pull. Three stitches. Right, so if you go fast, you're going to have a look like this. Okay, so we want to cast on 111 stitches. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we want a total of 111. So every couple of stitches, every 20 stitches, you can always enter a stitch marker onto here and continue knitting and continue casting on. And that'll just make it easier for you to count your stitches so that at the end you have an accurate 111. It'll help keep things organized. So cast on 111 stitches onto your needle. I will meet you once you've done that. So here we are, I've done casting on my 111 stitches. I've just put place markers in between just to help me keep track of my count. But now this is what my piece looks like. I've cut the tail because it was a bit too long, and we are ready to begin. So before we begin in the pattern, we're just going to do 3 rows of the moss stitch. So the moss stitch is on every stitch, row 1, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl all the way across. Flip your work. Where there's a purl, you knit. Where there's a knit, you purl all the way across. You flip your work, and then you repeat one more time. Where there's a knit, you purl, and where there's a purl, you knit. So let me show you. So the first row, we're just going to knit and purl all the way across. So to knit, you insert your needle from the bottom, from the front to the back. Wrap it around. Take the new needle, pull it from the bottom, back to the front, slide it off. Okay, that's a knit. Now for a purl, you bring the working yarn forward. Take your needle, insert it from the back to the front, like this. Take your yarn, wrap it around that same needle, bring it from the front to the back, pull it off. Now you knit. To knit, bring the working yarn to the back. So to knit the next one, bring your yarn to the back, insert your needle from the front to the back, wrap it around, bring your working needle from the back to the front again, slide it off. Now to purl, bring your yarn forward, insert your needle from the back to the front, take your working yarn, wrap it around, and slide it off. Okay, so we're just going to, for the first row, do knits and purls, all the way to the very end. So I'll meet you at the end of this round. So here I am, I've finished my first row. Now I'm going to turn my work, begin my next row. So we're creating the moss stitch. The moss stitch is going to look like this at the end. So we have these bumps that you see are purls, and the dents that you see are knits. So whenever you have a purl, you're going to knit on top of that. Whenever you have a knit, you're going to purl on top of that, right? So here's a purl, there's a knit. Here's a purl, there's a knit. There's a knit, on top of that's a purl. There's a knit, on top of that's a purl. So that's what you're going to do when you do the moss stitch, right? So we're going to only do the moss stitch for 3 rows. 1, 2, 3. Okay, to begin, and then we're going to start working on the pattern. So we did the first row so far, and we're going to begin row 2 for the moss stitch. So here we are at the end of this round. I finished my work, and now I turned it around, and this is what my piece looks like. So we are now going to work on row 2. It's hard to see, but we have purl, knit, here's the purl bump, knit, purl bump, knit, purl bump. Okay, so because the first one is a purl, we are going to do a knit onto that. Because the next one is a knit, we're going to do a purl on that. The next one is a purl, going to do a knit on top of that. And the next one is a knit, we're going to do a purl on top of that. So we're just going to continue knitting, purling, knitting, purling, knitting, purling all the way to the end. And we'll eventually create row 2 of the moss stitch. So we're going to continue working that all the way to the end. Then we're going to turn around and continue the same rules back to the beginning here for row 3. And that's going to create our moss stitch. So we're going to finish row 2. We're going to turn our work, do row 3, and I will meet you at the end of row 3. So here we are. I finished my 3 rows of the moss stitch, and this is what my piece looks like. So now we're going to be working on the pattern. So the pattern is made into 12 rows, and every odd row 1, 3, 5, 7, 11. We will be working it in the pattern, and every even row, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, we will do purls. Okay? So that's going to create a version of the stockinette stitch. So that's why we created this 3 rows of the moss stitch, because when you do the stockinette stitch, it curls. So you need a border at the beginning for it to not curl. Okay? So we're going to divide our piece into 3 parts. We have the first 7 stitches, the rest of them, 97, and the last 7 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. The first 7 and the last 7, we're going to continue in the moss stitch. So the same stitch we did here, we're going to continue all the way up. In between, that's when we're going to be working the pattern in the 12 rows that I explained. All right, so I'm going to show you now each row and what we're going to do. So here I am ready to knit. So the first 7 stitches we're going to do in the moss stitch. So I'm going to be working in the moss stitch the first 7 stitches, and it's going to be like that all the way to the very end of your piece. The first 7 and the last 7. Okay, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we're going to be working in the pattern. All right, so I'm going to be marking my places using my stitch markers just so that it keeps me organized and prevents and reduces the amount of mess ups that I would make. Okay, so for 7 I mark it. Now we're going to be working in the pattern at row 1 once again. Okay, so for row 1, for the pattern, we're going to knit all the way across. So knit the next 97 stitches all the way to the last 7 stitches. Okay, so just knit like this. Okay, so I'm going to meet you at the last 7 stitches after you've knitted the middle section of 97 stitches. Okay, I'll meet you there. So here we are, I've done my 97 stitches. Here's my last 7 stitches. I'm just going to place the stitch marker to separate the 97 from the 7. Okay, so now for the last 7, we're just going to work on the moss stitch. So I see that my beginning one is a purl, so I'm going to knit. The next one is a knit, so I'm going to purl. The next one is a purl, I'm going to knit. The next one's a knit, purl. The next one's a purl, I'm going to knit. Here's a knit, I'm going to purl. And the final one is a purl, so I'm going to knit like this. Okay, so that's the end of row 1. Now for row 2, we're going to turn our work, begin row 2. We're going to begin with a moss stitch for the first 7 stitches. Okay, now we're going to move our place marker over and continue in the middle section of our 97. We're going to purl. Because it's an even row, row 2, we're going to purl. So all even rows for the pattern, for rows 1 to 12, we're going to purl in all the even rows. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 12. So just purl like this. Okay, so we're going to purl to the last 7 stitches, where we will do the moss stitch. In those last 7 stitches here, we will do the moss stitch, and I will meet you at the end here. Okay, so here I am. I finished my 97 stitches for row 2. I've done my last 7 stitches in the moss stitch for row 2. Now I'm going to flip my work and begin row 3. See, without the border, the stockinette stitch tends to curl, and the curl can be very difficult to straighten, to flatten. So that's why we want to do the border at the beginning, because if we don't, it'll end up curling like this. And even if you block it, the curl will eventually come back. So that's why we do the border. For row 3, I'm going to begin with my moss stitch, and then I'll meet you here where we'll begin the pattern. Okay, so I've done my first 7 stitches in the moss stitch. I'm going to bring my stitch marker over to begin the pattern for row 3. For row 3, we're going to begin the pattern in a knit 2. So knit 2, 1, 2. Now we're going to slip, so that means insert your needle into the next stitch like you're doing a purl, as if you're doing a purl, and then slip it off. onto the new needle like that. So we just slipped, knit one, so knit the next one, PSSO. So when it says PSSO, all it means is the slipped stitch that we did, we're just going to bring it over the most recent stitch. So bring it over like this, like that. Okay, that's a PSSO, and you can see that this stitch right here is on an angle. So that's how you know you've created your PSSO. So PSSO is like a decrease. Now we're going to yarn forward, so bring your yarn forward. We're going to knit one. We're going to yarn forward again, knit two together. So the next two, 1, 2, we're going to knit them both together. And we're going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, like this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches there. And what I'm going to do is mark it. So I'm going to mark each section so that it's easier to count later on. In case I make a mistake, I can find where it is, and it's also easier to keep track so that I don't make mistakes. Now we're going to repeat, beginning with a slip. So a slip, then a knit, then a PSSO. Then we're going to yarn forward, we're going to knit one, yarn forward, knit the next two together, knit 3, 1, 2, 3. So you should have 8 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the pattern, and I'm going to mark that off. So the pattern for this project, when we work in the pattern, all the odd rows, it's going to be in sections of 8. So the first section will always be 9 or 10 stitches, because the beginning we always do 1 knit, and then we work on the pattern, or 2 knits. In this case we did 2 knits, and then we work on the pattern. And then every section, or 8 stitches, makes a section. So every section after that, until we get to the very end here, is made up of 8 stitches, right? And we're just going to repeat those 8 stitches to the very end for our 97 stitches till we get to the very end of our last 7 moss stitches that we have to do. Okay, so I'm going to repeat one more time. So we're going to begin with a slip, knit, PSSO, bring that slip over the knit. We're going to yarn forward, we're going to knit one, yarn forward, we're going to knit 2 together, and we're going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? And then I'm just going to mark it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to repeat these 8 stitches all the way to the very end, where I'll meet you at the end here. So the next one I'm going to be in is a slip, and then a knit, and then a PSSO, and then continue. So that's 1. So here I am at the end of my 97 stitches. This is what my piece looks like so far. I've done my last PSSO, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2 together, and instead of knitting 3 at the very end like we've done previously, we're going to knit 2. So if you have 2 left over, that's how you know you've done it correctly. We're just going to knit 2 instead of knitting 3, and here we are at the end. Now I'm just going to do my moss stitch for the last 7 stitches, and I'm going to turn my worker over, do the moss stitch again for the first 7 stitches, and then I will meet you to begin the next row. So here's my moss stitch. I'm going to turn my work over and begin the next row. So the next row, we're going to begin with the moss stitch, row 4.
Like this.
Bring my stitch marker over, and now because we are in row 4, 4 is an even number, so we're going to just purl all the way across for the entire 97 stitches till we get to the last 7 where we're going to do the moss stitch. Okay, so keep purling. When you get to the parts where you have the yarn over from the previous row, we did the yarn over, it looks like this. You're going to treat it as a stitch. So insert your needle as if it's a stitch, yarn over, and then complete a purl. What that's going to create is these holes. So these are the lacy holes that we want. So one more time, here's a yarn over. It looks like that. We're just going to treat it like a natural stitch and complete a purl. Now when I get to my first middle stitch markers here that I have all here, I'm going to just take them out and put them aside because we're going to use them for the next row. Alright, so I'm going to continue with my purls, taking out my stitch markers till I get to the last 7 where I'll do my moss stitch, and then I will begin row 5. So here we are at the beginning of row 5. So I finished row 4, I did my purls, did my last 7 moss stitches, turned my work around, did my beginning 7 moss stitches, and I'm ready for the pattern for row 5. So for the pattern for row 5, we're going to begin with a knit 1, then we're going to slip 1, knit 1, and create a PSSO. So take the slip, bring it over the knit, like that, and that creates our PSSO. Now we're going to yarn forward, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches. Place our marker and begin in the pattern. So we're going to begin in the pattern with a slip 1, knit 1, PSSO. Yarn forward, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1, like this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to put our next marker down. So that's going to be the pattern, these 8 stitches, all the way to the very end, where we have our last 7 stitches, where we'll do it in the moss stitch. Okay, so one more time, begin with a slip 1, then we're going to knit 1, do a PSSO, then we're going to yarn forward, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Put our marker and begin again with a slip. So that's what we're going to do to the end of this round. We'll finish this row, row 5, do my moss stitch at the end of the last 7, turn my work over. Then I will do my beginning 7 in the moss stitch. Then because it's row 6, which is an even row, I will work the pattern in a purl stitch all the way across like we've done. Ended in our last 7 moss stitches, turn my work over, and begin row 7. So row 7 is actually the same as row 5. So it's the same thing we did here. So once I turn my work over, begin row 7. I'm going to begin it in the first 7 in the moss stitch. Then I'm going to work the next 97 stitches in this same pattern right here. Okay, so we're going to do it again. Same thing. Beginning here at the beginning with a knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, PSSO, yarn forward, knit 3, yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to continue the next in the pattern, the 8 stitches, with a slip 1, knit 1, PSSO, yarn forward, knit 3, yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1. Then the next one, beginning with a slip 1, knit 1, PSSO, yarn forward, knit 3, yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1, and repeat, beginning with a slip 1. Okay, so it's same thing for row 7. So once you've done row 7, you're going to turn your work over, do row 8, because row 8 is a even row. You're going to do it in the purls. Once you're done row 8, turn your work over, and we will begin row 9. Okay? So that's what we're going to be doing for this row. I'll have the instructions on the screen. So here we are at the end of round 8. I finished my moss stitch for round 9 for 7 stitches, and I'm beginning and I'm ready to begin round 9. But this is what my piece looks like at the beginning of round 9. We have our clusters starting to form with our lace in between. Okay, so that's what our piece looks like at the beginning of round 9. Now for round 9, let us start that. So after you do your first 7 stitches in the moss stitch, the pattern for round 9 is we're going to begin with a knit 1, and we're going to yarn forward, knit 2 together. Like this, knit 3, 1, 2, 3. Slip, knit 1, PSSO, yarn forward, knit 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? So now we're going to repeat with a yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, slip, knit 1, PSSO, bring that slip over the knit, yarn forward, knit 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's going to be the pattern all the way to the end of this row, to the end when we get to our moss stitch. So one more time, we're going to begin the pattern with a yarn forward. Then we're going to knit 2 together. Then we're going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3, slip 1, knit 1, PSSO, yarn forward, knit 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So those are our 8 stitches. So we're going to repeat that to the end of this row, beginning with a yarn forward and a knit 2 together. Continue your moss stitch at the end, the last 7 stitches. Then you're going to turn your work, begin the moss stitch, do row 10 in purls because it's an even row all the way to the end. Do your moss stitch, turn your work, and I will meet you at row 11. So here we are at the end of row 10. I've turned my work around and ready to begin row 11, but this is what my piece looks like at the end of row 10. As you can see, comparing the two, this one here I didn't do the border, and look how much it curls. You can see that this one wants to curl, but because we did the border, it's not curling, and especially after we block it, it'll relax a lot more as well. But this one without the borders, you can see how much it curls. That one is unfortunately not good. But just to compare, you can see why we do the border at the beginning, how much a difference it actually makes. So now for row 11, let's begin that. So I'm going to begin working my first 7 stitches in the moss stitch, and then I will meet you here to begin the pattern for row 11. Here we are for row 11. I've done my first 7 moss stitches. Now I'm going to begin in the pattern. To begin in the pattern, we're going to start with a knit 2, 1, 2, and then we are going to yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1. Then we're going to slip 1, knit 1, PSSO, yarn forward, knit 3, 1, 2, 3. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches. We're going to repeat that pattern. We're going to begin with a yarn forward, knit 2 together, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, PSSO, yarn forward, knit 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're just going to repeat this pattern. One more time I will show you. We're going to repeat the 8 stitches. Yarn forward is your first one. Then we're going to knit 2 together. Knit 1. Slip 1. Knit 1. PSSO. Yarn forward. Knit 3. 1. 2. 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And then we'll just repeat, beginning with a yarn forward and knit 2 together. So that's going to be the pattern for round 11, for row 11. The 8 stitches. So we're going to do that all the way to the end, where we will finish our last 7 moss stitches. Then we're going to turn work over, because the next row is row 12. We're going to begin our first 7 moss stitches. Then all the rest of the 97 stitches are going to be in purls till we get to the end. The last 7 moss stitches. I will meet you at the end of row 12. So at the end of row 11, you're going to end off with 2 knits before you get to your last 7 moss stitches instead of 3 knits. So you know you've done it correctly if you have 2 knits left over instead of 3. And so we're just going to knit those last 2. 1, 2, and then we're at our 7 moss stitches. So I'm going to do my 7, turn my work around, do my first 7, do the rest in purls, do my last 7, and I will meet you at the end of row 12. So here we are at the end of row 12. This is what my piece looks like at the end of this row. As you can see, our clusters are starting to form. We've got our cluster, we've got our new clusters starting to be created as well. So this is what we're going to do for the remainder of this shawl. Repeats rows 1 to 12. Okay, so we're going to repeat rows 1 to 12 until our total piece measures 170 centimeters or 67 inches. So the next row will be row 1. For row 1, we are going to begin in the moss, do knits all the way across, end in the moss. And we're going to do row 2, which is begin in the moss, do purls all the way across, end in the moss, and then row 3, begin in the moss, do the pattern for row 3. So that's what we're going to do. Repeats row 1 to 12 until our piece measures 170 centimeters or 67 inches. I will meet you at the end there, where we will work our final border. So here we are at the end of this piece. I've created the length that I wanted. As you can see, here's the rest of the shawl. So what we're going to do at the end to finish it off is we're going to do the exact same thing that we did at the very beginning. So we ended off on row 12. So make sure you end off on row 12. And then you're going to do row 1 for the last row. So row 1 is border, knit all the way across, border. And that's going to create your last knitting row, and then at the very end we have 3 rows left, which is we're going to do the moss stitch for those 3 rows. So it's the same thing as the border. Okay, we're going to do that for the next 3 rows, and that will finish our piece. So just exactly how we did it at the beginning, and then we will be done. So you're going to do that, and then I will meet you once that's complete and we will cast off. So here we are at the end. I've done that, and this is what my piece looks like. I've done my last 3 moss stitch rows, and I'm ready to cast off. So to cast off, I'm going to cast off in the moss stitch pattern. My first one here is a purl in the moss stitch. So now I'm going to knit like normal, just as if I'm doing the moss stitch. And the next one is a knit. So I'm going to purl the next one. And we have 2 stitches complete. I'm going to take my previous stitch and bring it over the most recent stitch, like that. And then I'm going to repeat. So the next one is a purl. So I'm going to knit and bring the previous stitch over the new stitch. The next one is a knit. So I'm going to purl and bring the previous stitch over the new stitch, like that. And the next one is a purl. So I'm going to knit, bring the previous stitch over the new stitch, like that. And that's going to cast off in this moss stitch, so it'll be more coherent with the rest of the pattern. So that's what I'm going to cast off. I'm going to finish that, and then afterwards we are going to block it. So here I am for my usual blocking method. I'm just attaching it to a piece of cardboard with some pins, and I'm stretching it out, and then I'm going to steam it with my iron. What it's going to do is relax all the fibers and make it flat. So there are other ways to block it. You can put in the wash and stretch it out afterwards, but I'm just doing it my way. Because it's so long, we're going to have to do it a couple of times Also to note is these pins, unless you have rust-proof pins, make sure to take these out early or else the moisture may cause it to rust and it'll stain your piece. So just make sure after an hour or two, make sure to take them out and let it dry if it needs to dry some more, but don't leave it in here for too long or else it could stain your piece, especially if it's white like this. As you can see with the blocking, you can see how much more it expands in comparison. See? See all the extra room that we have on the sides that it expanded from. So here we are at the end of blocking it. This is what my piece looks like. As you can see, it did flatten out. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you for watching. Please check out my other videos on my channel and subscribe for more tutorials. And just a reminder, if you're interested in another knitting project, I do have a custom man sweater on my channel that you can create.